The leather briefcase lay concealed 3 feet beneath the earth at an isolated ranch property in the Arizona wilderness, holding precisely $600,000 in currency and the solution to one of Phoenix's most devastating legal homicides. When detectives finally excavated it 6 weeks following criminal defense counsel Sarah Thompson's mysterious disappearance, they understood they weren't merely examining proof of misconduct. They were confronting the reason behind calculated murder. What began as a missing individual investigation had transformed into something much more ominous. The currency revealed a narrative of treachery, despair, and ultimately, fatal vengeance. However, it would require months of meticulous investigation to comprehend precisely why someone desired Sarah Thompson eliminated, and how an ordinary court proceeding on a Tuesday evening had determined her destiny. If you are unfamiliar with our channel, ensure you press that subscription button and activate the notification bell, because today's investigation will guide you through one of the most intricate legal homicides in recent Arizona chronicles, where a briefcase containing currency exposed secrets that someone was prepared to kill to safeguard. This represents the narrative of a brilliant lawyer whose commitment to justice created powerful adversaries, whose ultimate case would reveal a criminal organization valued in millions, and whose vanishing following an apparently routine court proceeding would expose corruption that extended to the uppermost levels of Phoenix's legal and commercial establishments. What transpired during those critical hours between her final court appearance and the instant her family recognized she had disappeared? And what secrets were concealed alongside that briefcase in the wilderness? The responses will astound you. However, initially you must understand precisely who Sarah Thompson was, because comprehending her existence and profession is the sole method to grasp why someone desired her eliminated. Sarah Thompson represented the type of lawyer who demanded respect the instant she entered a courtroom, and at 38 years of age, she had already positioned herself as one of Phoenix's most formidable criminal defense attorneys. Standing 5 feet 7 inches with shoulder-length auburn hair that she consistently maintained, professionally styled and penetrating green eyes that appeared to perceive through any deception, Sarah possessed a presence that caused even experienced prosecutors to pay attention. Her standing in the Arizona legal establishment was constructed on an impressive history of defending clients in high-stakes criminal proceedings. Throughout her 14-year profession, Sarah had successfully defended alleged murderers, white-collar criminals, and organized crime personalities with a combination of thorough preparation and brilliant courtroom tactics that had gained her both respect and adversaries. Sarah was completely fearless in the courtroom, remembers Judge Patricia Martinez, who oversaw many of Sarah's proceedings. She would accept cases that other lawyers wouldn't handle, and she possessed this remarkable ability to discover the single piece of evidence or legal precedent that could entirely alter the result of a trial. Prosecutors understood that when they confronted Sarah Thompson, they better possess their facts completely accurate. Sarah's commitment to her clients originated from a profound belief in the constitutional right to legal representation that had been instilled in her from youth. Growing up in Tucson as the daughter of a public defender, she had observed firsthand how the legal system could disappoint those who couldn't afford quality representation. Her father, Robert Thompson, had devoted 30 years fighting for indigent clients, and Sarah had inherited his passion for justice. Even as a young girl, Sarah would sit in my office after school and listen to me prepare cases, Robert recalls with pride and heartbreak. She understood early that sometimes the only thing standing between an innocent person and a wrongful conviction was a lawyer who was willing to fight. That sense of justice motivated everything she accomplished. After graduating summa cum laude from Arizona State University College of Law, Sarah had begun her career as a public defender, following in her father's footsteps. However, after 5 years of being overwhelmed by massive caseloads and insufficient resources, she made the challenging decision to enter private practice, where she could provide each client the attention their case merited. Her law firm, Thompson & Associates, occupied a modest office building in downtown Phoenix, but the firm's reputation was anything except modest. Sarah specialized in defending clients accused of serious felonies, and her client roster read like a directory of Phoenix's most notorious criminal defendants. She had successfully defended alleged drug kingpins, accused murderers, and white-collar criminals in cases that had generated headlines throughout Arizona. Sarah's personal existence reflected the same intensity and dedication that she brought to her professional work. She resided in a beautifully restored historic home in the Roosevelt District, where she had created a sanctuary filled with law books, case files, and the art collection she had been developing since law school. She was married to Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a cardiologist at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and they had twin daughters, Emma and Sophia, who were both 15 years old. Sarah was incredibly organized in every aspect of her life, explains her longtime legal assistant, Jennifer Wilson. She would arrive at the office every morning at exactly 7 o'clock a.m. with her coffee and her detailed schedule for the day. She knew every deadline, every court appearance, every client meeting. Her calendar was planned out weeks in advance. This meticulous attention to detail extended to her case preparation. Sarah was known for spending countless hours reviewing evidence, interviewing witnesses, and researching legal precedents. Her office was filled with filing cabinets containing detailed notes on every case she had ever handled, organized with a precision that impressed even the most experienced attorneys. Sarah never entered a courtroom unprepared, states her law partner, David Anderson, who had worked with her for 8 years. She would know the facts of a case better than the prosecutors, and she would have contingency plans for every possible direction the trial could take. Her preparation was legendary. However, Sarah's success in defending controversial clients had also earned her enemies. Over the years, she had received numerous threats from victims' families, law enforcement officers who disagreed with her tactics, and even other attorneys who resented her success. She had learned to take security precautions, varying her daily routines, and installing a comprehensive security system at her home. On Tuesday, March 21, 2023, Sarah was scheduled to appear in Maricopa County Superior Court for a hearing in what would become her final case. She was defending Marcus Williams, a businessman accused of running a sophisticated money laundering operation that prosecutors claimed had processed over $50 million in illegal drug proceeds. The case had attracted significant media attention, and Sarah had spent months preparing for what promised to be a lengthy and complex trial. That morning, Sarah followed her usual routine. She arrived at her office at 7 o'clock a.m., reviewed her notes for the hearing, and met with her client to discuss strategy. She had no way of knowing that by evening she would be dead, and that the briefcase she carried to court that day would ultimately lead investigators to uncover the truth about her murder. The question that would haunt everyone who knew Sarah was simple. How does an experienced attorney who had faced down some of Phoenix's most dangerous criminals fall victim to murder after a routine court hearing? The answer lay buried in the desert, along with $600,000 that would reveal the deadly price of Sarah Thompson's unwavering commitment to justice. Tuesday, March 21, 2023, dawned clear and warm in Phoenix, Arizona, with temperatures reaching a pleasant 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Sarah Thompson arrived at her downtown office at exactly 7 o'clock a.m., as she had done every workday for the past 8 years. Security camera footage from the parking garage shows her walking confidently toward the elevator, briefcase in hand, ready for what she believed would be just another day in court. She seemed completely normal that morning, recalls Jennifer Wilson, Sarah's legal assistant. She was focused on the Williams hearing, reviewing her notes one final time. She mentioned that she thought the prosecution's case was weaker than they were pretending, and she was confident about our chances. Sarah's first task that morning was a final strategy session with her client, Marcus Williams. Williams had been accused of operating a money laundering scheme through his chain of car dealerships, allegedly processing millions in drug money over a 3-year period. The case was complex, involving financial records, wire transfers, and testimony from cooperating witnesses who had agreed to testify against Williams in exchange for reduced sentences. At 9:30 a.m., Sarah met with Williams in the attorney conference room at the Maricopa County Jail. The meeting, which lasted 90 minutes, was their final preparation before the afternoon hearing that would determine whether certain key evidence would be admissible at trial. Sarah's motion to suppress evidence was critical to Williams's defense, and both attorney and client knew that the outcome of this hearing could determine the entire case. Sarah was optimistic about the suppression motion, explains David Anderson, Sarah's law partner who had helped prepare the legal arguments. We had found what we believed was a significant Fourth Amendment violation in how the financial records were obtained. If the judge agreed with us, the prosecution's case would essentially collapse. After the jail meeting, Sarah returned to her office to make final preparations for the 2:00 p.m. hearing. She spent the lunch hour reviewing case law and organizing the documents she would need to present to the judge. Her assistant noted that Sarah seemed excited about the case, believing that her legal arguments were sound and that she had a good chance of winning a significant victory for her client. At 1:30 p.m., Sarah gathered her materials and left for the courthouse. Security footage shows her walking through the lobby of her office building, briefcase in hand, exchanging pleasantries with the security guard as she headed to her car. She was wearing a navy blue suit and carrying the black leather briefcase that had been a gift from her husband when she started her own practice. The hearing began promptly at 2:00 p.m. in Judge Robert Chen's courtroom. Sarah presented her suppression motion with the skill and preparation that had made her reputation. For nearly 2 hours, she argued that the search warrant used to obtain Williams's financial records had been based on insufficient probable cause and that the evidence should therefore be excluded from trial. Sarah was at the top of her game that afternoon, recalls prosecutor Lisa Martinez, who was representing the state in the Williams case. Her legal arguments were well-researched and persuasively presented. Even though we disagreed with her conclusions, you had to respect the quality of her advocacy. The hearing concluded at 4:15 p.m., with Judge Chen taking the motion under advisement, promising to issue a ruling within a week. Sarah packed her materials, spoke briefly with her client, and left the courthouse at approximately 4:45 p.m. Security cameras captured her walking through the courthouse lobby, but this would be the last confirmed sighting of Sarah Thompson alive. Sarah's car, a white 2021 BMW sedan, was found the next morning in the parking lot of a shopping center 15 miles from the Eburn courthouse. The vehicle appeared undisturbed, with Sarah's purse still on the passenger seat and no signs of struggle. However, the briefcase she had been carrying was missing, along with any clue about what had happened to Sarah. When Sarah failed to return home that evening, her husband Michael initially assumed she was working late on the case, as she often did after important hearings. But when she hadn't returned by 10:00 p.m. and wasn't answering her phone, he became concerned and called the office. Finding no one there, he contacted several of Sarah's colleagues, but none had heard from her since the hearing ended. At 11:30 p.m., Michael Rodriguez called the Phoenix Police Department to report his wife missing. Given Sarah's high-profile career and the nature of some of her clients, the police took the report seriously and immediately began investigating her disappearance as a potential kidnapping. We knew from the beginning that this wasn't a typical missing person case, explains Detective Lieutenant Carlos Rivera, who was assigned as the lead investigator. Sarah Thompson had made enemies during her career, and we had to consider the possibility that someone had targeted her because of her work as a defense attorney. The initial investigation focused on Sarah's recent cases and any threats she might have received. Detectives interviewed colleagues at her law firm, reviewed her recent court appearances, and analyzed her phone records for any unusual activity. They also examined the Williams case in detail, considering whether someone connected to the money laundering investigation might have had a motive to harm Sarah. Within 24 hours of Sarah's disappearance, the investigation had expanded to include the FBI, given the potential connection to organized crime through the Williams case. Federal agents began reviewing financial records and communications related to the money laundering investigation, looking for any indication that Sarah's disappearance was connected to her client's alleged criminal activities. The search for Sarah intensified when investigators learned about several threatening phone calls she had received in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. According to Jennifer Wilson, Sarah had mentioned receiving calls from someone who claimed she was protecting scum and warned her to be careful about the cases she chose to take. Sarah had reported these threats to police, but no arrests had been made. Sarah was used to receiving threats, explains Detective Rivera. It came with the territory of defending high-profile criminal cases, but these particular calls seemed more specific and more threatening than usual. We immediately began trying to trace the source of those calls. As the first week of the investigation progressed, police expanded their search to include the vast desert areas surrounding Phoenix. Using helicopters and ground teams, they combed through remote locations where someone might have taken Sarah. The Arizona landscape, with its miles of uninhabited desert, offered countless places where someone could disappear without a trace. The case attracted significant media attention throughout Arizona and beyond. Sarah's disappearance was front-page news in Phoenix, and the story was picked up by national news outlets due to her high-profile career and the mysterious circumstances of her vanishing. The legal community rallied around the search effort, with hundreds of attorneys volunteering to help distribute flyers and assist in the investigation. Sarah's family was devastated by her disappearance and frustrated by the lack of progress in the investigation. Her husband, Michael, took leave from his medical practice to focus on the search, while her teenage daughters struggled to understand how their mother could simply vanish. Her father, Robert Thompson, used his connections in the legal community to pressure law enforcement for more resources and attention to the case. Every day without answers was agony, Michael Rodriguez recalls. Sarah was the kind of person who called if she was going to be 5 minutes late. For her to just disappear without any communication was completely out of character. We knew something terrible had happened. The breakthrough in the case came 3 weeks after Sarah's disappearance, when investigators received an anonymous tip directing them to a remote ranch in the desert west of Phoenix. The IDT caller, whose voice was disguised, simply said, "Look for the briefcase at the old Mackenzie Ranch, 3 feet down behind the main house." The call was traced to a disposable phone that had been purchased with cash, providing no leads about the caller's identity. Acting on the tip, police obtained a search warrant for the abandoned ranch property, which had been vacant for over 5 years. The ranch, located 40 miles from downtown Phoenix, consisted of a deteriorating main house, several outbuildings, and hundreds of acres of desert land. It seemed an unlikely place to find evidence in Sarah's case, but investigators had few other leads to pursue. The search of the ranch property began at dawn on April 12th, exactly 3 weeks after Sarah's disappearance. Using ground-penetrating radar and metal detectors, investigators systematically searched the area around the main house. The desert soil was hard and rocky, making excavation difficult, but the team was methodical in their approach. At 2:30 p.m., investigators located a disturbed area of soil approximately 50 yards behind the main house. The ground showed signs of recent digging, and metal detectors indicated the presence of something buried beneath the surface. When investigators carefully excavated the site, they discovered Sarah Thompson's missing briefcase, buried exactly 3 feet underground, just as the anonymous caller had indicated. The briefcase contained $600,000 in cash, organized in neat bundles of $100 bills. The money was accompanied by a handwritten note that would change the entire direction of the investigation. The note, written in Sarah's handwriting, contained a list of names, dates, and dollar amounts that appeared to document some kind of payment scheme. Most significantly, the note included the phrase insurance policy and was dated just 2 days before Sarah's disappearance. Forensic analysis of the briefcase and its contents revealed additional crucial evidence. The case showed signs of having been handled by multiple people, and DNA evidence was recovered from the handle and latches. More importantly, soil analysis indicated that the briefcase had been buried within hours of Sarah's disappearance, suggesting that whoever killed her had immediately transported her belongings to this remote location. The discovery of the briefcase transformed the investigation from a missing person case into a homicide investigation. The $600,000 in cash clearly indicated that Sarah's disappearance was connected to financial crime, and the handwritten note suggested that she had been documenting some kind of illegal activity. Investigators now had to determine not only who had killed Sarah Thompson, but also why she had been in possession of such a large amount of cash. The anonymous tip that led to the briefcase discovery would prove to be the break investigators needed, but it also raised new questions about who had access to this information and why they had chosen to reveal it. As investigators analyzed the contents of the briefcase and traced the source of the money, they were about to uncover a web of corruption and betrayal that would shock the Phoenix legal community and reveal the true motive for Sarah Thompson's murder. 4 weeks had passed since the discovery of Sarah Thompson's briefcase, and the investigation had taken investigators deep into the shadowy world of legal corruption and organized crime. The $600,000 in cash had been traced through serial numbers to several sources, revealing a complex web of illegal payments that stretched far beyond the Williams money laundering case that Sarah had been defending. Forensic accountants working with the FBI had determined that the money came from at least 3 different criminal organizations, all of whom had been clients of Sarah's law firm over the past 2 years. The handwritten note found with the cash documented what appeared to be a systematic scheme of bribes, payoffs, and illegal fees that Sarah had apparently been tracking for months. The note was like a roadmap to corruption, explains FBI Special Agent Maria Gonzalez, who joined the investigation as it expanded into federal crimes. Sarah had documented meetings, payments, and communications that suggested she had uncovered something much larger than a simple money laundering operation. She was apparently building a case against her own clients. The investigation revealed that Sarah had been secretly cooperating with federal authorities for nearly 6 months before her disappearance. Unknown to her law partners or even her family, she had been working with the FBI to expose a network of criminal attorneys who were laundering money, bribing judges, and facilitating organized crime operations throughout Arizona and neighboring states. Sarah's cooperation with federal authorities had begun when she discovered that her client, Marcus Williams, was not just laundering money for drug dealers, but was also funneling illegal payments to court officials and other attorneys. Rather than simply defend Williams or withdraw from the case, Sarah had made the difficult decision to contact the FBI and offer to help expose the broader conspiracy. Sarah Thompson was a hero, Special Agent Gonzalez explains. She could have simply looked the other way or withdrawn from the case, but instead she chose to risk her career and, ultimately, her life to help us expose corruption in the legal system. The evidence she provided was instrumental in building cases against more than a dozen individuals. The $600,000 in the briefcase represented payments that Sarah had been instructed to make to various participants in the corruption network. According to FBI records, she had been wearing a recording device during many of her meetings with co-conspirators, gathering evidence of their criminal activities. The PD money was intended to be delivered to corrupt court officials and attorneys as part of an elaborate sting operation. But Sarah's undercover work had not gone undetected. Phone records and email intercepts revealed that several members of the criminal network had become suspicious of Sarah's activities in the weeks before her disappearance. Recorded conversations showed that at least one participant in the corruption scheme had suggested that Sarah might be cooperating with law enforcement. The investigation took a dramatic turn when DNA evidence from the briefcase matched Thomas Crawford, a 52-year-old private investigator who had worked for several of the attorneys involved in the corruption network. Crawford had a criminal record including assault and fraud convictions, and phone records showed that he had been in contact with multiple suspects in the days leading up to Sarah's disappearance. Crawford was what you might call a fixer for this criminal network. Detective Rivera explains, when they had problems that needed to be solved quietly, Crawford was the person they called. Our investigation revealed that he had been hired to eliminate the threat that Sarah Thompson represented to their operation. The arrest of Thomas Crawford came 6 weeks after Sarah's disappearance, following an intensive surveillance operation that had tracked his movements and communications. When federal agents raided his home and office, they discovered additional evidence, linking him to Sarah's murder, including maps of the desert area where her briefcase had been buried and equipment that could have been used to dispose of a body. Under interrogation, Crawford initially denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. However, faced with overwhelming physical and circumstantial evidence, he eventually agreed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Crawford's confession would finally provide answers about what had happened to Sarah Thompson on that Tuesday afternoon in March. According to Crawford's statement, he had been hired by Vincent Morrison, a prominent Phoenix attorney who was a central figure in the corruption network. Morrison had learned about Sarah's cooperation with the FBI and had ordered Crawford to neutralize the threat she represented. Crawford had followed Sarah from the courthouse after her hearing, forced her into his vehicle at gunpoint, and driven her to a remote location in the desert. Crawford claimed that he had not intended to kill Sarah, but rather to intimidate her into ending her cooperation with federal authorities. However, Sarah had refused to back down, telling Crawford that she had already provided enough evidence to destroy the entire network, and that killing her would not stop the investigation. Realizing that Sarah would never be silenced, Crawford had made the decision to murder her. The location of Sarah's body remained unknown, as Crawford claimed he could not remember the exact spot where he had disposed of her remains in the vast Arizona desert. Despite extensive searches based on Crawford's general descriptions, investigators were unable to locate Sarah's body, adding another layer of tragedy to an already devastating case. The corruption network that Sarah had helped expose was dismantled in a series of coordinated arrests that took place over several months following Crawford's confession. Vincent Morrison, the attorney who had ordered Sarah's murder, was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and multiple counts of corruption. 12 other individuals, including judges, attorneys, and court officials, were also arrested in what became known as the largest legal corruption scandal in Arizona history. The evidence that Sarah had gathered during her undercover work proved to be devastatingly effective. Recordings, financial records, and testimony from cooperating witnesses painted a picture of a systematic, criminal enterprise that had corrupted multiple levels of the Arizona legal system. The conspiracy had involved the fixing of criminal cases, the laundering of drug money, and the bribery of public officials on a scale that shocked even experienced federal investigators. Sarah Thompson's courage in the face of extreme danger helped us dismantle a criminal network that had been operating for years, explains U.S. Attorney Jennifer Hayes, who prosecuted the corruption cases. Her willingness to risk everything to expose the truth ensured that justice would ultimately prevail, even though she paid the ultimate price for her integrity. The trials of the conspiracy participants resulted in lengthy prison sentences for most of the defendants. Vincent Morrison was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in ordering Sarah's murder. Thomas Crawford received a sentence of 30 years in federal prison in exchange for his cooperation and testimony against the other conspirators. The broader impact of the corruption scandal led to significant reforms in the Arizona legal system. New oversight procedures were implemented for attorney conduct, enhanced background checks were required for court personnel, and additional safeguards were put in place to prevent the type of systematic corruption that Sarah had helped expose. Sarah Thompson's law firm established a foundation in her memory dedicated to supporting attorneys who risk their careers to expose legal corruption. The Sarah Thompson Justice Foundation provides financial and legal support to attorneys who choose to cooperate with law enforcement in corruption investigations, ensuring that future whistleblowers will not face the same isolation and danger that Sarah encountered. Her family, while devastated by their loss, found some measure of comfort in knowing that Sarah's sacrifice had led to meaningful reform and justice. Her husband, Michael, and daughters Emma and Sophia became advocates for legal ethics and attorney safety, working to ensure that Sarah's legacy would continue to inspire others to choose integrity over personal gain. The case officially closed when the last of the conspiracy participants was sentenced, but Sarah Thompson's impact on the Arizona legal system continues to this day. Her story became a powerful reminder of the courage required to stand up to corruption and the ultimate price that some heroes pay for their commitment to justice. Today, the Memorial Garden at the Maricopa County Courthouse honors Sarah Thompson and other legal professionals who have died in service to justice. The inscription reads simply, "She chose truth over safety, justice over silence." Her briefcase, once buried in the desert with $600,000 in evidence money, now sits in an FBI evidence room as a testament to one attorney's unwavering commitment to doing what was right, regardless of the personal cost. The investigation into Sarah Thompson's murder may have concluded, but her legacy as an attorney who was willing to risk everything for justice continues to inspire a new generation of legal professionals to uphold the highest standards of integrity and courage in their service to the law.